Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at an extremely cool submachine gun, although this is actually a factory semi-auto version of the SIG MKPO. Now, SIG had two versions of submachine gun, or in this case, semi-auto carbine, that they developed in the 1930s. So the system was initially developed in 1933 by two engineers at SIG, a guy named Gotthard End, helped by a guy named Jacob Gatesy, and they developed a delayed blowback system for it was intended to be a submachine gun kind of for anybody, but it was released in two different patterns. They were all MK, that's machine carabiner, or it's like a submachine gun, but a little bit bigger. And then the M model and the P model, so MKM and MKP. M was military, that had a 400 millimeter, about 16-inch barrel. P was police with a shorter barrel, 300 millimeters or about 11.8 inches. They had folding magazines. They were chambered for basically any pistol cartridge that you wanted at the time. So you could get this in either the Mauser or the Luger cartridges. So 7.65 Parabellum, 7.65 Luger, 9mm Luger, 7.63 Mauser, or 9mm Mauser. Your choice. 9mm Mauser 9x25 was really quite a potent cartridge. This particular one is in 7.65 Parabellum, which is going to be the softest shooting of all the different options. Now, O at the end stands for top eject, and the top eject guns had this delayed blowback system in them. They were introduced onto the market in 1935, and they really didn't sell very well. In 1937, SIG introduced a simplified version, and it would be the S. So instead of MKPO, this was MKPS, or MKMS for the military version. Again, same magazines, same long versus short barrels for military and police. But this new S version, the S stood for side eject. It was actually like a 45-degree angle, and they were simple blowback because the main problem with these guns was expense. They were just too pricey for almost anyone to actually purchase. They're great quality. They're gorgeous, fantastic guns. I've had the chance to shoot one of the MKPS simple blowback versions. It's awesome, but man, you can tell from the machining that went into it, the Swiss quality also has a Swiss price tag. So we'll talk about who did buy these in a minute, but first, let's dig into this one and let me show you how it works. If it wasn't clear already, I think these are just absolutely gorgeous guns. The manufacturing work is impeccable. They've got these really distinctive angled hand grip slots at the front, and of course, they feature folding magazines, so how could I not like that? An interesting element of this is that there's no locking mechanism that's actually on the magazine well. The locking mechanism is this little spring-loaded cover here. So if you see those little ledges right there, they sit right behind the magazine well here, and that's what prevents it from lifting up when it's in the folded position. If I hold this out of the way, I can just pivot the magazine up and down. And then in the shooting configuration, when the magazine's extended, this little hook, also on the cover, locks into that area on the magazine well, and again, that's what's holding it in place. There's no actual latch here. So the way you fold and unfold it is to grab this, and that's why it's got these raised ridges on it, pull it back, and then, now in order to get the actual magazine out, there is a release catch right up here. Push that in, and it lets you take this out. The police versions all had 30-round mags, the military versions had 40-round mags, and the reason for the difference is simply the length of stock available to fit the magazine in when it's folded. So the magazines are essentially the same. They're interchangeable between the guns, but if you put a 40-rounder in here, you simply can't fold it because the stock's not long enough. These aren't actually marked with their model designation, but they are marked by SIG. So Society Industrial Swiss, SIG, out of Neuhausen. And then we have a serial number right down there. They started at 1000 or 1001, so this is a very, very early one. Control-wise, we just have a safety selector, so safe and fire. Because this is semi-auto, of course, there's no selector switch on it. The sights look just like they came off of a Swiss K31 bolt action. Same with the front sight there. It's got that angled track for the front sight blade so that you can tap it forward or back a little bit to get minute adjustments in windage. And then we've got our charging handle on the right side. Bolt is serial numbered, of course. And this is an interesting operating system. So looking at it up close now, first off, I think in the past, I've erroneously referred to these as being levered delayed using like the Curie system. They are not. They're definitely not. They have a tilting bolt. So this is the locking piece. And as you can see, when I pull the bolt back, it's going to come back a little bit. And then this locking piece tilts down, boop, out of the way, and then it can cycle. So this is, by the way, open bolt. It's semi-auto, but it's semi-auto open bolt because the submachine guns were similarly open bolt firing. So I'm going to use a brass rod here and just push on the bolt from the inside as if I were shooting a cartridge. And what's interesting is the whole bolt assembly goes back about a 1/4 inch, so quite a lot. Then the bolt body will have started moving, so it'll have some inertia, so it will keep moving, and once it goes back, it drops this locking piece down and cycles. But what's interesting to me is upon firing, this whole thing is immediately going to open that far, as if it were simple blowback. And that's far enough that if this were necessary to drop the pressure in the chamber, I would think that's enough opening that it would break, it would vent through the cartridge. It would break the brass. So this makes me wonder if this is actually a rate reduction mechanism. And while I have shot one of the simple blowback MKPS guns, I've never shot one of these, and so I'm not sure what the rate of fire is actually like. But this seems more like a rate reducer than an actual delayed locking system. But of course I am going to show you the inside. So to disassemble this, we're first going to put it on safe. You actually have to have it on safe in order to remove the rear cap off the receiver. And when it's on safe, and if that cap's not on, the gun won't fire at all either. So put that in safe, and then I can push the release button and unscrew this. The spring is really my biggest pet peeve with this gun. It's definitely under compression. So I held it in and the spring actually kinked itself while I was taking it apart. This is a super annoying spring. There were a bunch of early submachine guns that were done with little tiny diameter springs like this that will immediately curl themselves into curlicues when you try to put them back into the receiver. The solution to this is to have a mainspring that is essentially the same diameter as your receiver tube, which makes it impossible for it to kink. People would figure that out later on, but this is one of those early guns before it happened. Now, put this back into fire. I can pull the bolt back to this position, lift out the bolt handle, and pull out the operating parts. All right, so here's the bolt and bolt carrier assembly. We can just pop the two pieces apart. The hook right there acts against a ramp right there to have this lift up when it's fully in battery. So when you fire, this whole thing in this position is going to go backwards until this stops against the top of the chamber right there, the top of the receiver opening. Once it stops, this mass will continue to move backwards like so, and then after that much travel, it pulls this locking piece down, which then allows it to slide free back into the receiver to eject the empty cartridge. Again, it doesn't really seem like a locking system or delaying system to me. It seems like a rate reducer. The firing pin, by the way, is fixed here on the bolt carrier. So it's an open bolt firing gun. So the moment that it goes fully into battery, it's going to pick up a cartridge like this, go forward. This is going to hit the back face of the barrel and stop. The back end, the bolt carrier, will keep going forward, lifts this piece up, and then the firing pin protrudes and it fires. There you go. That's all there is to it. I will, however, also take the action out of the stock. So this is held in place. The trigger guard is held in place by two screws. each of which is locked in place by its own locking screw. So I just rotate the locking screws into alignment with the main screws, and then we can pull these out and lift up the whole trigger guard assembly, complete with the magazine well locking thing. This is serialized on the bottom and also here on the inside. With that removed, the stock just lifts up off the action. So nothing really going on there. There's a metal reinforcement here because otherwise you'd have this really flimsy section of the stock because it has to be hollowed out for the magazine to stow. And then here is the action, our pivoting magazine well that just flops free when you don't have the additional catch on it. This is actually just held in place by one little pin here, so we can take that off. Before I forget, let me point out the magazine is marked 7.65, so this is how you can identify which caliber it is designed for. All right, so there's our lock work. I want to bring your attention specifically to this little angled piece. This is under spring tension, and if it is not pushed down, the trigger doesn't actually work. So you can see here, when I pull the trigger, it's going to pull this forward, which drops the sear. If that's released, it doesn't. This is a safety that prevents you from firing the gun if you don't have the receiver end cap screwed on. This end cap pushes that down when it's threaded into place. You'll also notice a little slot here. That slot is for this, which is connected to our safety lever. So when I put the gun on safe, it draws this forward, which pulls this piece of metal out of that slot. If the gun is in the fire position, this locks into the rear end cap, like so, and prevents you from taking the end cap off. So they really went to a lot of work to make sure that you couldn't screw this up and like fire it and blow the bolt back out in your own face because you were dumb when you disassembled it. You can also see here how this rear end cap is holding this safety downward and out of engagement. So that's about it. There's a semi-auto disconnector in here as well, of course, but it's a little hard for me to get inside there and show it to you, but it's a pretty typical semi-auto disconnector. Not a lot else to see in there. So there you go, one disassembled SIG MKPO semi-automatic police carbine. Between 1933, when the first version was developed, and 1941, when production ceased, a grand total of 1,228 of these subguns were made, of all four models put together. So delayed blowback, simple blowback, military length, police length, all of them put together. The two most notable, most substantial purchasers were, one, the Papal Vatican Guard, the Swiss Guards, who actually bought a bunch of these, and also the Finns. The Finns bought 282 of them shortly before the Winter War. The Finns were in 9mm parabellum. I don't recall off the top of my head what the Swiss ones, the Vatican Guard ones, were chambered for. But just, I mean, 1,200 guns in 8 years is not a very successful campaign. So I have no idea how many of them were semi-auto like this versus full auto, but this was a gun that was marketed to the police. And there were definitely police agencies that specifically wanted them just as semi-auto carbines without the full auto capability. This particular one was brought into the country by Sam Cummings, gun dealer extraordinaire, who's responsible for a lot of the really cool, really interesting Swiss guns in the US. He went over there on a couple of occasions, and every time he went, he would purchase an assortment of cool stuff from SIG. So this is one of the guns he brought in. I think he brought in a couple of each of the four patterns of these guns. And as a semi-auto, it was something he was able to bring into the country, and it is here registered as simply a short-barreled rifle, which is really cool. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Big thanks to the anonymous viewer who loaned this to me for showing to you guys. Thanks for watching.